I rise in support of Section 65 of this bill, which reestablishes a commission for the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing. And I would like to just to tell a story as my comment about why I think this is important. In August of 2020, I was in my classroom preparing for the most uncertain school year in history. And a colleague of mine came in and she had a mask in her hand, and she told me that on my roster that year, I would have a student named Julia, and that Julia was deaf, and she asked me if I would wear a mask with a plastic window because Julia communicated through reading lips. And I teach Spanish, and you need to understand what people are saying. And so I said, of course, I would accommodate. And she came in the next day, she sat in the front row, and I had my mask on, and I began my lesson, and almost immediately that mask fogged up. And so over the next few weeks, we tried a bunch of different remedies. We put some defogging spray on there. We looked online. We rubbed some toothpaste on the mask, washed that out. That was supposed to prevent the fogging. We gave her scripts to the audio. We put subtitles on video. And I even gave her my presentation slides in advance so she would have a heads up on what I was teaching. And it wasn't until I had a device around my neck that Bluetooth connected to her cochlear implant that she was able to access the lessons. She worked diligently, harder than some of her non-disabled peers, and she did well. Fast forward to 2022, I got a phone call from the president of the Connecticut Association for the Deaf. It was a different kind of phone call. There were pauses. She was on a video phone, and she asked me, do you support people that are deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing? And I said, of course. And I told her my story about Julia, and so we decided to meet. So I went to her house, and an interpreter was arranged. I met her husband, who's also deaf. And she didn't begin our conversation with a list of legislative priorities. She didn't begin a talk to me about how she didn't like government. She told me about her family. She told me about her kids. She told me about her grandkids, the activities they were involved in, the sports they played, the things they did together. She told me she was a teacher, just like me. I found out we have the same dentist. And we have a very similar relationship between grandparents, grandkids, and those in between. The conversation was humanizing. And then later on, she broke out that list of legislative priorities, and she stressed how important the reestablishment of the Bureau for the Deaf, Deafblind, and Hard of Hearing in the Department of Aging and Disability Services would be. And so I started to support her. I attended the governor's advisory group on deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing. She invited me in December to a conference to talk about how best to advocate with legislators. She followed up with a meeting with the speaker. And here we are today, considering legislation that will help that community of Connecticut residents. You know, I was thinking, a couple weeks ago, I was in the guidance counseling office at my school. And I went to Julia's guidance counselor, and she's a senior now. She was a freshman when she was in my class. And I said, how's Julia doing? And she said, you know, Julia, she's got lots of friends. She plays a sport. She's going to college next year. She got into a couple colleges, so she's going to college next year because she got a scholarship. And I was so proud that my little school could accommodate, could put together services so that Julia could live a life that was not very different than her non-disabled peers. And so when I consider this proposal that we have in front of us for this bureau, I think about how, through the establishment of a bureau, using funds that were allocated for COVID, could help a lot more kids than Julia, could help a lot of older people, could help a lot of families, could enable them to live their lives with dignity. That's why I think we're here, to help people live the lives they dream. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.